You can hold the spotter scope, Grandma. Try not to drop it. The group of younger SEAL candidates, all mountains of muscle and sun-bleached confidence, let out a collective snicker. The insult hung in the dry, salty air of the Coronado Island firing range, sharp and condescending. In the center of their circle stood Chief Warrant Officer Evelyn Reed, a woman whose late 40s were etched in the fine lines around her eyes and the subtle streaks of gray at her temples. She was a ghost in their world of vibrant, aggressive youth, dressed in a standard-issue uniform that seemed a size too big, her presence as muted as her expression. She offered no retort, no flicker of anger. Her response was a quiet, deliberate action. She reached down and picked up the heavy, high-powered spotting scope, her hands steady, her movements economical. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. She braced it against the tripod with a practiced grace that was utterly at odds with the administrative role they had assigned to her. But someone was watching. Across the range, Gunnery Sergeant Miller, a man who had seen 3 decades of war, narrowed his eyes. He saw it. He saw the way her feet were planted, a perfect, balanced foundation. He saw the way her fingers moved over the focus knob, not searching, but knowing. It was the posture of a shooter, not a clerk. He saw the subtle shift in her gaze as she scanned the distant targets, her eyes absorbing the shimmering mirage and the treacherous dance of the wind. A knot of unease tightened in his gut. They thought she was a nobody. He was suddenly terrified she was a legend. If you believe respect is earned, not given, type earned in the comments below. The architect of the mockery was Lieutenant Commander Thorne, a man sculpted from the very ideal of a special operator, tall, chiseled, and radiating an aura of absolute certainty in his own superiority. He was the class leader, and he saw Chief Reed not as a fellow service member, but as a bureaucratic obstacle. In his mind, she was a REMF, a relic from an older, slower military who was only on his range to sign off on their ammunition expenditure reports. He continued his performance, projecting his voice so the whole group could hear his lesson. He pointed downrange at the complex target array, a simulated village bristling with hidden threats, and began a pompous lecture on the advanced ballistics required for the final test. He spoke of wind shear, the Coriolis effect, and spin drift with the air of a high priest revealing sacred mysteries. "This isn't something you learn from a book, ma'am," he said, the honorific dripping with sarcasm as he gestured vaguely in her direction. "This takes talent." Instinct, his acolytes, the younger SEALs, nodded in fervent agreement, their loyalty pledged to his charisma. They created a wall of indifference around her, talking over and around her as if she were a piece of equipment, their complicit silence isolating her more effectively than any direct insult. But Evelyn Reed was not in their world. She was in a world of her own, a silent space defined by observation and calculation. She ignored the noise, the posturing, the arrogant pronouncements. Her entire being was focused downrange, listening to a language no one else could hear. The whisper of the wind as it curled through the canyons, the story told by the dust devils 1,000 yards away. Her hand made a tiny, almost imperceptible adjustment to the scope, a movement born from 10,000 hours of quiet, lonely practice. The crisis arrived with the anticlimactic metallic clang of a final, missed shot. The last SEAL sniper team had failed. The ghost scenario, the capstone exercise of the most difficult sniper course in the world, had defeated them all. Downrange, the simulated high-value target remained untouched, a steel testament to their failure. Lieutenant Commander Thorne threw his rifle's logbook to the ground in a fit of theatrical rage, blaming the impossible wind, the subpar equipment, anything but his own team's shortcomings. Gunnery Sergeant Miller's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Time. The exercise is a failure." A heavy pall of dejection settled over the elite operators. From the observation tower, a quiet figure descended. It was the base commander, a full-bird colonel whose presence commanded immediate silence. He surveyed the dejected SEALs, his gaze lingering on Thorne's angry face before shifting to the calm, composed figure of Chief Reed. Thorne scoffed, loud enough for the colonel to hear. "No point trying again, sir. The wind is a living entity today. Maybe the chief here can file a weather complaint for us." The colonel's eyes went cold. He ignored Thorne completely and walked directly to Reed. His voice was low, but it cut through the tension. "Chief, feel like showing these boys how the old guard gets it done?" Evelyn Reed didn't smile. She simply looked at the colonel and gave a single, short nod. Yes, sir. She didn't walk towards the SEAL's state-of-the-art carbon fiber sniper system. Instead, she moved to a worn, scarred Pelican case at the edge of the firing line, a case no one had even noticed. She opened it, and inside, nestled in faded foam, was an M210 enhanced sniper rifle, a heavier, older, semi-automatic weapon that the young SEALs considered an absolute relic. She assembled it with a fluid, rhythmic efficiency, each click of the magazine and snap of the bipod a note in a familiar song. She didn't touch the sophisticated digital wind meters the SEALs had been obsessing over. She simply plucked a single blade of dry grass, held it up, and watched it fall. She settled behind the rifle, her body seeming to merge with the weapon and the earth beneath it. She became a statue of focused intent. Her breathing slowed until it was almost imperceptible. Thorne crossed his arms, a smirk fixed on his face, eagerly anticipating the public failure that would validate his entire worldview. The other SEALs exchanged skeptical glances. The wind was howling, whipping across the range in unpredictable gusts. Making one shot at that distance was a miracle. A cold-bore shot with an old rifle was a fantasy. Reed did not fire. For 30 seconds, then a full minute, she waited. She was not looking at the targets. She was watching the world around them. She watched the heat haze shimmer. She watched a distant flag flutter. She watched the very air itself. Then, for a sliver of a second that no one else perceived, the chaos subsided. A pocket of calm, a perfect, fleeting corridor of still air, formed between her position and the village. It was a window that wasn't on any chart, a moment of opportunity that only a master could see. In a single, seamless motion that was too fast to properly track, she squeezed the trigger. It wasn't one shot. It was 7. 7 rounds left the barrel in such a rapid, controlled sequence that they sounded like a single, violent tear in the fabric of the air. Thump, 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 thump. A deafening silence fell over the range, broken a second later by a chorus of impossibly distant metallic reports. Tink, 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 tink. Through the spotting scopes, a scene of impossible carnage unfolded. The HVD target was down. The 2 steel guards on the rooftop beside him were down. The driver of a moving vehicle target, struck through the windshield, was down. A hidden sniper in a high window, a target no one had even spotted, was down. A comms antenna on the roof was shattered, and the final shot had struck a simulated explosive charge, which erupted in a puff of red smoke. An entire enemy command unit, neutralized by a single shooter in less than 3 seconds. Thorne's jaw was slack, his face a canvas of disbelief. No, he whispered, the sound stolen by the wind. No way. That's not possible. Nobody can read that wind. Nobody shoots like that. The colonel walked forward, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He moved with a calm deliberateness, his eyes fixed on the stunned lieutenant commander. He placed a heavy hand on Thorne's shoulder, and the younger man flinched as if struck by lightning. Lieutenant, the colonel's voice was dangerously quiet, yet it carried the weight of absolute authority. You are about to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions. He turned to his aide, a young ensign who was staring at Chief Reed with undisguised awe. Ensign, pull up Chief Warrant Officer Reed's file. Read the summary. Unclassified portions only, if you please. The ensign's hands trembled slightly as he manipulated his tablet. The screen glowed, and he began to read, his voice growing stronger and more incredulous with every word. Name, Evelyn Reed. Rank, Chief Warrant Officer 5-inch. A few of the SEALs blinked. CW5 was the highest, most revered warrant officer rank, reserved for technical masters of their craft. Unit, classified. Formerly attached to Joint Special Operations Command, Task Force. The ensign paused, swallowing hard. Task Force designation is redacted, sir, he continued, his voice now ringing with a kind of reverence. Combat deployments, 17. Combat hours, over 4,000. Primary specialty, Special Operations Target Interdiction. Secondary specialty, High-Angle Marksmanship Instructor, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The SEALs stared, their arrogance melting away into cold shock. DevGru, SEAL Team 6. The best of the best. Awards include, the ensign's voice cracked, the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Device, and the Distinguished Service Cross. He looked up from the tablet, his eyes wide. Sir, there's a note on her file from General. Redacted. It says she holds the standing record for the longest confirmed kinetic strike in a combat zone. The distance is classified. A profound silence held the range captive. The information settled over the group of elite warriors like a physical weight, crushing their egos, rearranging their understanding of the world. The colonel let the silence do its work before he spoke again, his voice now a low, sharp blade directed at Thorn. Lieutenant, the reason you found this course so difficult is because Chief Reed designed it 10 years ago. She wrote the book. The reason the wind seems impossible is because she chose this exact firing point, at this exact time of year, to teach operators like you to see beyond the damn numbers on your Kestrel. She is here to force you to learn the art, not just the science. He gestured to the old rifle now resting on its bipod. That M210? That's the rifle she used on a moonless night in the Hindu Kush to dismantle a command and control cell from over 2,200 meters away. To you, it's a museum piece. To her, it's an extension of her will. With that, the colonel turned his back on the humiliated SEALs. He faced Evelyn Reed, who was already methodically breaking down the rifle, her work done. He drew himself up to his full height, his posture ramrod straight, and executed a slow, deliberate salute. It wasn't the quick, perfunctory gesture of a superior to a subordinate. It was the deep, reverent salute reserved for heroes, for legends, for recipients of the Medal of Honor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that went far beyond military courtesy. "My apologies for the ignorance displayed here today. I assure you, it will be corrected." Gunnery Sergeant Miller, seeing the colonel's salute, instantly snapped to attention and rendered his own. Then, one by one, like dominoes of humility, the young, arrogant SEALs followed. They stood stiffly, their hands raised to their brows, their faces a mixture of shame and awe. They were no longer saluting a logistics officer. They were saluting a ghost. The story spread faster than a wildfire in a dry canyon. Before the brass casings from Reed's rifle had even cooled, the legend of the Ghost of Coronado was already being whispered in the barracks, texted between firebases, and spoken of in hushed, reverent tones in the bars where operators gathered. It became an instant cautionary tale within the tight-knit naval special warfare community. The quiet, unassuming logistics officer who had single-handedly, and with a seeming relic of a rifle, outshot an entire class of SEAL sniper candidates wasn't a joke. She was a standard. Lieutenant Commander Thorne's hubris became the central pillar of the lesson. The phrase "don't get Reed" quickly entered the special operations lexicon, a direct and potent warning against the lethal combination of arrogance and assumption. The official reprimand Thorne received from the colonel was nothing compared to the crucible of his own shame. The next morning, at 0445, he stood alone outside the nondescript administrative building where Reed worked. When she emerged, he stood in her path, his posture stripped of all its former swagger. There were no excuses, no justifications. He simply stood at attention and delivered a formal, sincere apology for his words, his attitude, and his profound lack of respect. Then, in the ultimate act of surrender, he asked if she would teach him. He asked for her mentorship. Evelyn Reed looked at the humbled officer, her expression unreadable. She gave a single nod. "Be on the range at 0500, she said, her voice even. "And be ready to listen to the wind." Her vindication wasn't in his apology. It was in the chance to forge a better warrior. Gunnery Sergeant Miller walked the range himself that afternoon, finding all 7 of the spent 762mm shell casings ejected from the M210. He took them back to his workshop, where he polished each one until it shone like gold. He mounted them carefully in a deep shadow box, arranging them in the exact pattern of the targets she had struck. Beneath them, he affixed a simple, engraved brass plaque, the Reed drill. Coronado. Competence is silent. Respect is earned. That box was hung in the main briefing room of the sniper school, a permanent, unavoidable monument to the day humility was taught with 7 perfect shots. The M210 rifle, her rifle, was officially retired, but it was not sent to a dusty warehouse. At the colonel's insistence, it was placed in a glass display case in the training center's main hall, a silent teacher bearing witness to the truth that the warrior is always more important than the weapon. Thorne became her most dedicated student. He unlearned his arrogance and replaced it with a deep, abiding patience. He learned to feel the wind on his skin, to see its path in the swaying grass. 6 months later, deployed in a hostile territory, his team was pinned down. An enemy sniper had them trapped. In a swirling, unpredictable crosswind that had every digital sensor screaming errors, Thorn breathed, waited, and saw the lull, the brief, perfect window he had been taught to recognize. He fired one shot. The threat was neutralized. His after-action report stated, simply, that the successful shot was due to unconventional wind-reading techniques learned from CW5 Reed. Her legacy was no longer just a story. It was saving lives. Years passed. Captain Thorn, no longer a lieutenant commander, stood before a new class of eager, nervous SEAL candidates in the same briefing room. He was the commander of the training center now, his own temples showing the first signs of gray. His posture was one of quiet authority, not of boastful pride. He pointed a finger at the shadow box on the wall, at the 7 gleaming shell casings. He told them the story. He didn't spare himself, detailing his own arrogance, his own ignorance, with brutal honesty. He told it not as a story of his humiliation, but as the story of his true education. He spoke of Chief Warrant Officer 5 Evelyn Reed, long since retired, as a figure of institutional reverence, a quiet professional who had reshaped their entire doctrine without ever raising her voice. The most dangerous person on any battlefield, Thorn told the silent room of young warriors, is never the one making the most noise. They are the one you don't see, the one you dismiss, the one you underestimate. True professionalism has no rank, no gender, no age. It is a commitment to absolute excellence, a discipline so profound it needs no announcement. The Reed drill was now the final, dreaded qualification test for every NSW sniper. It was designed to be almost impossible, a test not just of marksmanship, but of humility. To pass it was to prove you had mastered yourself as much as your rifle. The quiet competence of one woman had been forged into the very soul of the institution, ensuring her silent lesson would echo for generations. True strength is never found in the volume of a voice or the swagger of a step. It is a quiet thing, forged in the lonely hours of discipline, honed by 1,000 unseen failures, and revealed, finally, not in a boast, but in a single, decisive, and perfect action. The world is full of noise, of arrogant pronouncements and demands for attention. But the world is changed, and battles are won by the quiet professional. They are the masters who inhabit the silence, who do not seek validation because their skill is its own reward. They do not demand respect, because their actions command it, leaving others no choice but to give it. A legacy is not a statue you build in your own image. It is the solid, unshakable foundation you lay so that others may build upon it higher and stronger than before. It is the echo of quiet competence that rings out, clear and true, long after the noise of the arrogant has faded into nothing. In a world desperate for heroes who shout, the greatest power belongs to those who simply do the work. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where a lifetime of discipline defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.